It's like the annihilating fire. The annihilating fire that burns through the woods, woods so big I cannot even say, that are up on the highest peaks of the mountains, and the light that shines from that. That's how the light shone off the divine bronze of the Achaeans as they went, shone through the ether and up to heaven. The many groups of men, they went like winged birds, like geese, like cranes, like long-necked swans, as they go glorying in their wings, and then they settle down in some Asian meadow by the Caustrias, clanging at one another, so that the whole meadow echoes with it. That's how the groups of men were now. Those that came here and there, pouring from the tents and the ships of the Achaeans, pouring onto the Scamandrian plain. So now they stood there like leaves or blossoms in the springtime, in their tens of thousands. That's how they were on the blossoming plain of the Scamandros. The men were like swarms of flies. They were like in the springtime when you first put out the buckets of milk in the sheepfold and the flies swarm on them. That's how the Achaeans with their flowing hair were now, in front of Troy, eager to kill, hungry to kill. It was like when there are goat herds and they very easily divide up the wide herd of goats and put them out to pasture. Now the leaders of the Achaeans divided them here and there, and powerful Agamemnon went with them. Agamemnon, who like in his eyes he was like Zeus, and in his face he had abs like Ares. His chest was like Poseidon. It was like when there's a herd of oxen and there's one ox that stands out among all of the oxen, a great bull who stands out among all the oxen. This is what Zeus made Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, into on this day, so that Agamemnon stood out preeminent among the heroes, stood out from the crowd. Speak to me now, muses. You who have your homes on Mount Olympus, you are goddesses and you know everything. We only know whatever we hear. Who were all of the leaders and the commanders of the Danaans? I couldn't tell you. I couldn't name that whole crowd. Not if I had 10 tongues, not if I had 10 mouths, not if I had a voice that would never break and the heart in me was bronze. But you, muses, daughters of aegis-bearing Zeus, you know how many came to Iliad, how many came to Troy. So now I will tell you the commanders of the ships and all of the ships. It was Menelaus and Leitus that led the Boeotians, along with Archelaus and Lonion, Cothoenor, all those that lived around Hyria and rocky Aulis, Skoinos, Skolios, mountainous Achaean, those that lived at Thespiae and Graiae and Mykolesos with its big open country, those that lived at Harma, Elysion, Hetion, Elon, Chile, Medion, Mycalia, the well-built city, Copai and Thisbe with its many doves, Coronea and grassy Haliartus, those that held Plataea, those that lived at Glissas, those that lived in the strong, well-built city of Hypothebe, those that lived at the sacred sanctuary shining of Poseidon, Onchestos, Arne with all of its vineyards, Medea, sacred Nisa, all the way out at Land's End Amphidon. From all these places, 50 ships went. 50. And on each one there were 120 young men of the Boeotians. Now those that lived at Aspledon and Minuean Orchomenos, they were led by Ascalaphos and Ialmenos. They were the sons of Ares. They were the sons of Ares that Astyache bore. Astyache bore them in Actor's house. Actor is the son of Asdus. You know, Astyache, she was a shy girl, but she still went upstairs to the attic with powerful Ares. Slept with him in secret. "30 hollow ships went with them in a row. Then it was the Phocians, Schedius and Epistrophus. They were the sons of great-hearted Iphitus. He was the son of Naubolus. All those that held Kyparesos and Rocky Python and sacred Crisa, Dallas and Panopeus and Anamorea and all around Hiampolis. Those that lived along the shining river Cephisus and at Lilaia, at the mouth of the Cephisus. Those were the Phocians, 40 black ships full of Phocians. And they went full of young men, and they set up right to the left of the Boeotians. And then it was the Locrians. Ajax led the Locrians. Ajax, the son of Oileus, he was the lesser Ajax. He was not as big or the same sort as Telamonian Ajax. He was lesser. He was small. He wore linen armor. But, you know, with this spear, he surpassed all of the Hellenes and all of the Greeks. Yeah, Ajax. He led the Locrians. Those from Kinos and Opoies, Kaliaros, Bessi, and Scarphi, and lovely Algeas, and Tarphi, and Thronion, and all around the streams of the Boagrius, those were the Locrians. There were 40 black ships full of them, those that live right across from holy Euboea. Now, Euboea, that was where the fury-breathing Abantes were in charge. The Abantes, they ruled over Chalcis, Dion, High Dion, Charistos, Styra. Alephanor was their leader. He was the scion of Ares and the son of Chalcedon. He was the leader of the great-hearted Abantes, the fast Abantes. With their hair flowing out behind them, the Abantes, they followed him. They were spearmen. They were hungry to rend the breastplates from around the chests of their enemies with their outstretched spears. 40 black ships went with them. Then it was Athens. The well-built city, yeah. You know, it was the land of Erechtheus. Erechtheus, whom Athena raised up, but really it was the life-giving earth that bore him. And then Athena took him and set him up in her rich temple so that all year long, for all of the years, the young men of the Athenians would appease him with lambs and with bulls. It was Menelaus who was their leader. He was the son of Peteus. And you know, okay, Menelaus, he was maybe the best on earth for putting horses and men in order. But Nestor was just as good. But Nestor was also older and had more experience. 50 black ships went with them. Ajax led 12 ships from Salamis. And he set up their phalanxes just next to the Athenians. And those that lived at Argos and walled Tiryns, all those that were around Hermione and Asine, they're here around the deep gulf. And Troysden and Aona and Epidaurus with all of its vines, and Aegina and Mases, where the young men of the Achaeans are. It was Diomedes. Diomedes of the great war cry. Maybe we should say it's the psychotic scream. He led them. And Sthenelus went with. Sthenelus, who was the son of famous Capaneus, and Euryalus was the third. He was a man like a god. He was the son of Mecisteus, who was the son of Lord Tolios. But you know it was Diomedes. Diomedes of the great war cry. He led them all, and 80 hollow ships went with them. And then those that held Mycenae, the well-built city, and rich Corinth. Those that held Ornea and lovely Algaea, Thisbe. Those that lived in Amyclae and Helos by the sea, and Oitylos. All of those cities. Agamemnon led 100 ships from those cities. Agamemnon was the best because he led the most men. And now Agamemnon, he armed in his blinding bronze, glorying. Agamemnon, he was the best, preeminent among heroes because he led the most men. and those that lived in Lacedaemonia with all of its ravines, Pharis and Sparta, and Messi with all of its doves, and Briseis and lovely Algaeus. It was Menelaus. Menelaus, the brother of Agamemnon. He led 60 ships from them. He armed them apart from the others. He who trusted so much in his own strength, who went around stirring up war. He who especially wanted vengeance over Helen for her moans and her urges. Then it was Pylos. The ones who lived around Pylos and, well,
Irene?
Lovely Irene. And Telios and Helos and Dorian. Dorian is where the Muses first stole the song of the Thracian Thamyris. You know the Thracian Thamyris? He was coming from the house of Oechalia and Eurytus. That's the only reason anyone goes to Oechalia. And he had been boasting, he'd been bragging that he could actually beat the Muses themselves, the daughters of Aegis-bearing Zeus, in a contest of the song. And so they were pissed. And they blinded him. And they took away his divine song, and they made him completely forget how to play the guitar. It was Nestor, who was the Gerenian horseman. He led them. And 90 hollow ships went with. And those around Arcadia and the high mountain of Calenia, next to the tomb of Hypatus, you know, where the men really know how to fight hand to hand. Those that are around Phenius, and Orchomenus with all of its sheep, and Ripe and Stratiae, and Windy and Nispe, and Tegea, and lovely Mantinea, and Stymphalos. Yes, and Parasia. All of those, well, those Arcadians came in 60 ships with Agapenor who was the son of Agasthenes. And you know, it was Agamemnon himself, Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, that gave them those 60 well-benched ships to cross the wine-dark sea. The Arcadians didn't care about sailing before. And those that lived at Buprocyon, and Hellas, and Hermine, and Mercinos, all the way out at the headland, and the Oilian rock, and Alesius that was crammed in between. These had 4 leaders. They were 10 ships with each that were full of the Achaeans. The first leaders were Amphimachus and Dalpius. They were in turn sons of Taxus and Eurytus, who were both sons of actors, so I guess they were first cousins. And then the third was powerful Diores, who was the son of Amarynchus. And the fourth was godlike Polyxenos. He was the son of Agathos, who was the son of Augeos. And Dulichion. Dulichion and the Achaean islands, and all that is across the sea, from Elis on the sea, those were led by Meges. Meges, who was the son of Phyleus. You remember Phyleus? Phyleus, who was the horseman that Zeus loved. Phyleus, who, you remember, he got pissed at his dad and then he left home? Well, he was Meges then. And Meges led 40 black ships. Odysseus. Odysseus led the high-hearted Cephallenians, all those that held Ithaca and Neretus with its trembling leaves, Crocodilia, jagged Aegilops, Zakynthos, Samos, the mainland, and all of the other land just across from it. That was Odysseus. Odysseus, who was like a genius. He was just like Zeus. Odysseus led 12 red-cheeked ships. Thoas. Thoas led the Aetolians. Thoas, who is the son of Andrymon. All those that were by Pleuron and Olenos and Pylene and Chalcis by the sea, the other Chalcis, and rocky Calydon. All of the sons of great-hearted Oeneus were dead, and Oeneus was dead. Blonde Meleager, he was dead too. So now it was Thoas that gave all of his commands to the Aetolians. 40 black ships had come with them. Idomeneus. Idomeneus, who was famous with the spear, he led the Cretans. Those that were around Knossos and walled Gortines. Vaistos, Retium, Listos, and Miletus, and Lycastos. These were big cities, the whole 100 Cretan cities. It was Idomeneus, who was famous with the spear, who led them. And Meriones went with him. Meriones, who was like Enyalus, man-slaughtering Enyalus, the god of battle. 80 ships went with them. Tlepolemus? Big, strong Tlepolemus. He was the son of Heracles. He led 9 ships from Rhodes. They divided themselves into 3, so that they were in 3 cities. Lindos and Hyalesos and shiny Cameros. Tlepolemus, he was born to Astyache, not the other Astyache. This Astyache, who Heracles had taken when he sacked Ephyra. He took her from Ephyra and around the streams of the Seleucus, killing many strapping men. So Tlepolemus grew up in a palace, until that day that he killed his maternal uncle, who happened to be dear to his father. So that right away he had to get a fleet together and get all of the men, and they ran away across the sea because the other sons and grandsons of Heracles threatened him. So by the time Tlepolemus came to Rhodes, he was a wanderer. He had suffered many pains. But they settled there. According to tribe, 3 by 3, and they were loved by Zeus, and he poured down wealth on them. Nereus. Nereus led 3 ships from Cyme. Nereus, who was the son of Aglaea and Carpus. Nereus, who was definitely the prettiest man to come to Ilion, to come to Troy, except, of course, for the blameless son of Peleus, Achilles. But Nereus, he was weak, and he led very few men. And all those that lived at Nisiros and Crapathos and Cassos and Kos and the city of Eurypylus and the Calydnian islands, those were led by Pheidipus and Antiphus. They were both sons of Thessalos, who in turn was the son of Lord Heracles too. I don't know if he threatened Tlepolemus as well. And now, as many as lived around Pelasgian Argos, around Aloe and Alope and Trachis, the ones that held Thea and Hellas with all of its beautiful women. They were called Myrmidons and Achaeans and Hellenes. All of these were led by Achilles, 50 ships. But now he just lied, raging grievously over the girl, Briseis with the good hair. He did not put his men in order. He had worked hard for her. When he sacked Larnissos and the well-walled city of Thebe, and he had killed Mianos and Ioannos, who were the sons of Aeneas, who was the son of Salapios. So now he lay there raging over her, but soon enough he was going to get up. And those that held Phylaki and flowery Persassos and the sacred sanctuary of Demeter, and Eton, the mother of the flocks, and Antron by the sea, and grassy Telios. Of all these, Protesilaus, the hero, warlike Protesilaus, was the leader. Except, well, he was their leader while he was alive. Now the black earth held him, and he had left behind in Phylike a wife with grief-torn cheeks and a half-finished house. Some Dardanian man had killed him when he leapt, first by far of the Achaeans, onto the Trojan shore. So the men longed for him, but they did not go without a leader. It was Podarches. Podarches, who was the scion of Ares. Podarches, he was the son of Iphiclus, who in turn was the son of Phylaki, with all of the sheep. And Podarches was the full brother of Protesilaus, but he was younger. Protesilaus was older, and he was better. The hero, warlike Protesilaus. His men did not go without a leader, but they longed for Protesilaus because he was awesome. 40 black ships had gone with them as well. And Methone, and Thalmachia, and Melibea, jagged Olisdon. It was Philoctetes. Philoctetes, who was the great archer, right? He took 7 ships from those places, and on each ship he had 50 men. Each one of them were great archers too, and they really knew how to fight. But Philoctetes, he was not with them. Now he lay on the island of holy Lemnos, where the sons of the Achaeans had left him, suffering terrible pains, where he had been bitten by an evil snake. And so his wound festered, and he lied there, suffering terrible pains. But soon enough the Argives beside their ships would remember the Lord Philoctetes. So the men longed for Philoctetes, but they did not go without a leader. It was Medon, the bastard son of Oileus, Oileus the city sacker who had him with Rhene. He led them now. And Triki and Ithome, the stony place, and Oikalia, you remember where Eurytus lives, that's the only reason anyone knows anything about Oikalia. They were led by the 2 sons of Asclepius, who are Podaleros and Machaean, both of them good doctors. Of course they would be, right? They're the sons of Asclepius, he's the god of health. And then Ormenius and Hyperesia, the Hyperine spring, and the rocky peaks of white Titanos and Asterios. Those were all led by Eurypylus, who was the son of Euaemon. 40 black ships went with them, and Argisa, and Girtone, and Orthe, and Helone, the white city of Oloesos, I don't know, it sounds Norwegian. They were led led by Polypoetes, who never ever gives up in battle. He's steadfast. Polypoetes, who is the son of Perithous, who in turn was the son of Zeus. Now, Perithous had engendered him with Hippodamia, and Hippodamia actually gave birth to him on that day when they drove the shaggy-chested centaurs out of Mount Pelion towards the people of the Ithiki. Yes. 40 black ships went with him, too. Gunius from Kiphos led 22 ships. It's random, I know. They were full of the Enyenes and the Parabioi. They were also steadfast in war, just like Polypoetes. And all those that lived along the snowy folds of Mount Dodona, and they worked the land around lovely Titaressos, the river Titaressos that flows into the Peneus, but it doesn't mix with the Peneus because it flows on top of it, like oil on top of water, because it's an offshoot of the dread river Styx, the Oath River. And the Magnesians? The Magnesians were led by Prothoos, the son of Tenthredon. Those that lived at Peneus and up on Mount Pelion with its trembling leaves, it was Prothoos, Thoos. That's what it is in Greek. Prothoos, Thoos. Fast Prothoos, he led them. And 40 black ships went with him. And those were the leaders and the commanders of the Danaids. Woo! Yeah! 30-second dance party.
Come on, you just 25 minutes of recapturing the ships.
We made it through the ships. We made it through. We're almost there. But now, tell me, muses, who were the best of the men that came with the two sons of Atreus? And who were the best horses? Yeah, that's right, I said horses. Well, the best horses, Eumelus drove them. Eumelus, the son of Pheres. They were raised up by Apollo and Peria. They were of the same coat and of the same age, and they had the same size across their back. They were fillies, but they carried with them fear and Ares. And the best man was Telamonian Ajax, at least as long as Achilles still raged, because Achilles was the best by far, and so were his horses. But Achilles now just lay in his ship raging at Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, and no one put his men in order. So they just played frisbee on the beach. Lawn darts. They had archery contests. And the horses just stood around chomping clover and celery. And the chariots just lay all covered in the tents of their masters. So these men longed for their war-loving leader, but they went back and forth along the wide army, and they did not fight. But now, like fire that rages across the earth after Zeus has smote somebody with his lightning, like when Zeus smote when he smote Typhoeus and the Eremoi all around Typhoeus, and they say that Typhoeus still lies there. That's how the earth groaned now beneath the feet of the Achaeans as they went, and they cut hard across the plain. But Iris, who is the fast-footed, her feet are like the wind, the messenger of Zeus, she went to the Trojans with a painful message. And she found them, all the Trojans, they were assembled into an assembly right before the gates of Priam. They were mixed together, young and old. And she went and stood there, and she likened herself to Polites. Polites, who was the son of Priam, and he's the one who sat watch high up by the tomb of Lord Icetius, trusting in his fast feet, just waiting for the minute that the Achaeans moved from their ships. And so now, like him, Iris, fast-footed, addressed them all and said, "Old man, you are so in love with making speeches, it's like you think we're in peacetime. We are not. This is open war. I have lived through many battles of men, but never have I seen such a force and so many as there are Achaeans now coming towards the city. They are like leaves. They are like grains of sand. So come. I order you especially, Hector. It is time to put the people in order, and as all throughout the great city they speak different languages, you must make it so that one who leads each person, so that one who is in charge of each group of people can give them the orders in their own language." That's what she said. And Hector immediately recognized the voice of the goddess and broke up the assembly. And they all went and put on their armor, and they rushed. And they flung open the gates of the city, and all of the people moved. Now there's a hill right in front of the city. It's a high hill, and they actually call it Thorn Hill. And so now it was around here that the Trojans ran, rushing here and there, divided up among the allies and the Trojans. Yes, all the Trojans. The Trojans were led by Hector. Hector, who was huge and had a shiny, shiny helmet. And he led the most and the best Trojans. And they were all armed and ready. And then it was Aeneas, the son of Anchises. He's the one who led the Dardanians. He was the son of Anchises and Aphrodite. They'd had sex. In the folds of Mount Ida, it was weird, a goddess lying like that with a mortal. And so that was Aeneas. And he wasn't alone, but the two sons of Antenor went with him. They were Archilochus and Achamas. And those that held Stelia and all the lower foothills of Mount Ida, the Trojans that they say drink the black water of the Aesopus, they were led by the shining son of Lycaon, whose name is Pandarus. Remember that. Pandarus, who Apollo gave a bow to. And those that lived at Adrastos and held the whole area around Ipsus and Piteas and the high mountain of Tereus. The leaders of them were Adrastus and Amphius, who wore linen makeup. So weird. Who wore linen armor. And they were the two sons of Merops. Merops, who was from Percote. You know, Merops was a seer who could really see everything, and so he tried to have it so that his boys wouldn't go into man-destroying battle, but they didn't listen to him. It was the black spirits of death that drove them. And then those that lived at Percote and Practium and Cestus and Abaddon and Shining Arisbe. Well, it was Asios, the son of Hyrtakos. Asios, the son of Hyrtakos. He led the fiery horses from Shining Arisbe along the streams of the Seleuce. And it was Hippethos. Hippethos who led the spearmen, the Pelasgian spearmen, those that live all around fertile Larissa. And it was Hippethos and Pelias, who was a great hero, and they were the sons of Lethos. Lethos, who was the son in turn of Tituminus. Yeah, that's right. You knew it. I knew it. We all knew it. And then there was Achaean, the other Achaean. There's a lot of Achaeans on the Trojan side. And they led the Thracians. Achaean with the hero Perus. The Thracians and all of those that were held in by the strong flowing streams of the Hellespont. And then Euphemos. Euphemos, who led the Paeonians with their curved bows from around far off Amadon. Oh, I'm dying. And the river Axios. The Axios that has the most beautiful water, but it spreads all over the earth. And then there were the Paeonians. Nope. Yes. Nope. Paphlagonians. Yes. And woolly, spirited Pylomenes. He led them from Anatoi. That's where all the race of wild half-asses lives. I don't know how that's possible, because I thought mules were sterile, but we'll go with it. And then around the streams of the Parthenius, where they had their famous homes, and Cromnos, and Agialos, and high up Erythenes. And then Odios and Epistrophus led the Halizdones from far off Alibe, and they were ready to fight. And then it was Chromos and Anomos. They led the Mysians. And you know, Anomos, he was a great bird seer, but he was not led by bird sight. Instead, he too was led by the dark spirits of death, because he was cut down by the hands of Achilles in the river, where Achilles also slaughtered many other Trojans. That's a spoiler alert. And then Phorcys and godlike Ascanos, they led the Phrygians and all of the area from Ascania. And they were also eager with the spear. And Mesthles and Antiphus, they led the Maeonians. They were the sons of Talamenes and the Gygian lake. How does that work? I don't know. But they led from there all the people from Mount Tmolus. And then there was Nasties. And with my Chicago accent, it's really more like nasty. Nasties, he led the ones with the barbarians' voices, which is also unclear, because what the hell is everyone speaking? They're all the ones that have barbarian language. And they held Miletus and the mountain of Peron with endless leaves. And they led all those from around the Meagros, the streams of Meagros, and the high up mountain. Nastes and Amphimachus, they were the sons of Enoeus, and he was a fool. He had worn gold into battle like a girl. Achilles killed him in the river too, and took his gold. And then it was Sarpedon. It was Sarpedon who led the Lycians. Sarpedon and blameless Glaucus, they led all those from far off Lycia and the streams around the Xanthos. Yes, the Trojans done. Like Lord of the Rings, it just keeps ending. So now all the Trojans were put in order, and they were shouting and clanging at one another. They were like the birds that go clanging, the flocks of cranes, when they're running from the winter winds and the heavy rains. That's how the Trojans went, clanging. But the Achaeans, they moved in silence, breathing fury, ready to help one another out. It was like when the south wind brings a great mist onto the mountains, and it's not a friend of the shepherd. I mean, it's worse than night in terms of thieves that come. You can't see, you can't even see as far as you can throw a stone. That's how it was now, as all of the dust that was kicked up under the feet of the Achaeans and the Trojans, and they cut fast across the plain. Now these two armies were coming closer together, and godlike Alexander, you might know him as Paris, he went into the front lines of the Trojans. He was wearing a leopard skin, he had his curved bow, he had his sword, he had 2 spears. Each one tipped in bronze, and he steps up and he's challenging all of the best of the Achaeans to come and fight him. And Menelaus noticed him, saw Paris jump out with his big strides from his companions, and Menelaus now, he was so happy, he was like a lion, a starving lion. When he comes across the carcass of a horned deer or a great goat, and he doesn't even care that the dogs are coming and the strapping young men. He's so hungry. That's how Menelaus was, so happy now, because he wanted to punish this bastard. So he, with all of his armor, jumped down from his chariot onto the ground. And godlike Alexander, Paris, he saw Menelaus. And right away, he jumped back into the crowd of his companions trying to escape Black Death. It was like when there's a guy who's walking up in the mountains and all of a sudden he sees a snake come out and he's like, whoa, and he jumps backwards and all the color goes out of his cheeks and the trembling takes his knees. That's how Paris now jumped back into the crowd of his companions so that he could escape death. And Hector saw this. And Hector told him off with harsh words. Bad Paris! Man, you are a pretty boy, you're a cheater, you're just girl crazy. I wish you had never been born. Better yet, I wish you had died before you got married. Now you're just an outrage. Something for everyone to look down on. Now you make all of the Achaeans so happy because they think you look good, they think you can fight, but there's no strength in your heart. There's no courage there. Were you like this when you went across the sea in your seafaring ships to mix with foreign men and steal their good-looking wives, even though those good-looking wives had in-laws that were spear fighters? And now you won't even stand up against war-loving Menelaus? You should know what kind of husband your wife has had. And now your golden gifts of Aphrodite and your pretty hair and your good looks, none of that is any good when you mix in the dust. You know, in truth, it's the Trojans that are cowards. Otherwise, they would have stoned you long ago for what you've done to us. And Paris, he just said, Hector, you told me off right. Not beyond what's right. You know, you're like an axe. You're like an axe that's always unyielding, and some guy is driving it through a tree up in the mountains when he wants to build a ship. That's what you're like. All your guts are just relentless, like an axe. But you shouldn't tell me off about the gifts of the gods. You know, you can't throw those away. It's not like they just choose anyone to give them to. But if you want me to fight and to make war, then order all of the other Trojans and Achaeans to cut oaths of friendship and put me and warlike Menelaus in the middle, and we will fight over Helen and all her stuff. And whoever wins, whoever is most powerful, then let him take them. And everyone else will be fine. And Hector was happy. And right away he went over to the Trojan phalanxes and he settled them all down, holding up his spear by the middle, and they sat down. But the Argives, they were all throwing stuff at him, and arming, trying to aim their arrows. So it was only the great shout of Agamemnon, "Quit it! You young Achaean men, stop throwing shit! I think Hector wants to say something." So they were all quiet. And then Hector, with his shiny helmet, he went and spoke to both sides. All right. Hear me. This is the plan of Paris. Paris for, well, we all know who started this shit, right? Now, he says, let the Argives and the Trojans swear a truce. And let's put him and war-loving Menelaus in the middle, and let them fight over Helen and all her stuff, and whoever is more powerful and whoever wins, he can take it home. And everyone was quiet. And now Menelaus came and said, now listen to me. You know that my heart has been the most affected by this whole business. And when I think about how this conflict, my conflict has divided the Trojans and the Achaeans, because Alexander, the godlike Paris, he started this. So now, whichever one of us death and fate choose, let him die. And everyone else can just go their separate ways. So now bring a lamb. Bring one white and one black, one for earth, one for the sun. Bring another lamb for Zeus. And bring the force of Priam, so that he himself can swear the oaths, because his sons are assholes. They are untrustworthy. You know, younger men, their thoughts just fly back and forth in their minds. We need an older man who can look forwards and backwards to make things better for all of us. That's what he said, and now everyone was so happy because they were hoping it was over, that the war was ending. And so right away they put all of their chariots in line, and they took off their armor, and they threw all their armor on the earth so that there was hardly any little grass left. And Hector, he sent 2 heralds right to the city of Troy to have them bring the lambs and to bring Priam. And Agamemnon ordered Talthybius to go back to the hollow ships to get his lamb. And Talthybius did not disobey Agamemnon. so much for coming. I'm so humbled that any of you want to be here, especially you sat through the ships. I want to give a huge shout out to my director for this week, Donovan Reiter. And of course to Alex Martalogu. I want to give a shout out to my students who are doing the classics play this week. Some of them are here at Mainline Wednesday through Saturday, so please check them out. They're doing Plautus. And I want to give a big welcome to Jimmy Blay, who's going to be directing next week.